I could forgive you if you think that the single I have coming out this fall has nothing to do with what my channel's always been about. But you would be wrong. Not only does this song harmonize very well with everything my channel actually stands for, it is exactly the kind of song that I think our world requires right now. So let's talk about One Man's Fool by Genesis. 1996 was a particularly brutal year for the band. That was the year that Phil Collins, their drummer and vocalist, left the band to focus exclusively on his solo career. But not only that, once they hired Stiltskin vocalist Ray Wilson to replace Collins as singer, something happened in June of 1996 that compelled Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford to write this song. One Man's Fool ended up being the last song on the last album Genesis ever made. So you could make the argument that this is basically like an outro for the band, like a closing ceremony for this legendary group. Here's why it exists. On June 15, 1996, the Provisional Irish Republican Army, or IRA, put a time bomb in a box truck and blew it up in downtown Manchester, England. Their target was infrastructure, not human beings. So the IRA actually warned the authorities about the bomb with 90 minutes left on the timer, which gave them plenty of time to evacuate the many thousands of people that were in the area. As a result, nobody died, but over 200 people did get injured, and the structural and environmental damage to the area ended up costing well over £1 billion in today's money. As for why the IRA carried out this attack, that is a very, very long story that I'm not going to tell the entirety of today. The criminally short version is that they were in favor of the reunification of Ireland, which had been partitioned back in 1920 into what we now consider two distinct countries: Northern Ireland, where the IRA was situated, and the Republic of Ireland to the south. From the IRA's perspective, the primary obstacle preventing Irish reunification was the fact that the Republic of Ireland was independent, but Northern Ireland is part of the UK. So they wanted to change that by any means necessary. They were so dedicated to their cause, so certain that it was righteous and correct, that they were willing to escalate to that level of violence for it. So Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford wrote One Man's Fool as a way of saying, "You sure about that?" Now, being Englishmen, Banks and Rutherford were not in a position to critique the veracity of the IRA's claims or comment on the righteousness of their cause. The purpose they wanted this song to serve was to question certainty. To say, you are so certain you're right that you're willing to kill about it. You're willing to risk open war because of how certain you are that you are correct, and how certain you are that accomplishing that goal is worth the cost of war. But when you're calculating that cost, are you only considering the cost paid by those who fight the war, or are you also taking into consideration the cost paid by those who survive the war? Civilians, bystanders, we all pay a cost when war happens. Are you also saying that you are so sure your cause is correct that the cost paid by everyone is worth it? Just how sure are you about that? That's what this song is about. But Seth, you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with Star Trek or anything else you talk about here on this channel? If you followed me for any period of time, you know that in addition to being a fan of Star Trek, I am also a person who was raised in a very conservative evangelical Christian context. And I spent most of the 2010s deconstructing all of that. So I know a thing or two about what it takes to tear down something that at one point you were entirely certain was correct. And while I was going through that process, I clung to Star Trek like a lifeline. Star Trek was like my philosophical anchor while I was tearing everything else apart. And it helped me reconstruct something in the absence of what I destroyed. And what I built in its place was, in the physical plane, based on altruism, and in the spiritual plane, based on mysticism. The altruism led me away from my conservative politics, while the mysticism radically transformed the way I relate to God and the institution that is Christianity. I still maintain relationships with both, but those relationships look very, very different now, if for no other reason than certainty plays no role in either one of them. The notion that any idea or principle could be worth dying for or killing for doesn't make sense to me anymore. These days, violence is something I consider only for self-defense, and even then, the defense has to be proportionate to the aggression, in my view. But that logic might not scale very well, for all I know. I mean, for example, in the second half of the song, there's a line that says, drawing lines upon the sand, ultimatums, on the land, on the sea, borders, then dying to defend them, seems quite meaningless to me. I'm not sure how the altruistic mystic I am now feels about that particular sentiment, because for better or worse, and regardless of how dedicated to peace I am personally, I still share a planet with plenty of other humans who will aggress if they can. And if they do, I still feel like I need a better answer to that than just going, well, it doesn't mean anything, so... At the end of the day, this song is about grappling with some of the deepest, darkest questions humans ever have to consider just because we share space with other humans. And whether or not I've ever explicitly come on here and said that that's what my online presence is about, that is what my online presence is about. And I think it's what Star Trek is about. And every once in a while, it can also make for some pretty damn compelling music, too. So me covering this song and releasing it as a single in 2025, that's just me taking all three of these things and colliding them into one big thing. If for no other reason than to end 2025 with a clang and clatter. As soon as I have a release date, I'll let you know. But until then, live long and prosper.
It's one man's joy makes another man weep. Nothing you can do